this conversation specifically focused on our IA2 data. I'm really excited to be able to dig into it and give us a chance to not only see great areas where our kids are doing really well, but also to be able to prioritize like where areas we want to focus, move forward, and specifically what we want to do in practicing that with those kids. Right. I think the first thing I wanted to say was that I was super excited looking in terms of where we had our level 3, seeing our level 3 finish up at almost 30%. We're right at 27%, which is the highest that we've ever finished there. Yes. Really, really excited about that. Can you tell me kind of anything that you saw that was like a key attribute to us getting such a high number at level 3?
Probably the biggest thing is just the amount of practice that we have to push the kids, always leading up to IA number 2, and just holding every single student accountable for showing the right work every single time, whether it's practice on homework, guided practice, independent practice, or bi-weeklies, and making sure that they're showing that exemplar response every single time.
It's really, really something that's valuable. You know, we've been talking about exemplar work and how do we set kids up. I think that gives you so much feedback to be able to help them in the spot. Specifically, I would love to dig in. I saw some of the highest performing questions were question 1 and question 21 in terms of student mastery, way over 60% on those questions across the board. Would love to see if there was an exemplar that shows exactly what you were looking for from one of those students, like on question 1.
Question 1, yes, we have one of our students is dealing with proportions and being able to find the amount of tax for a particular item. And I teach my kids to use proportions using different shapes or squares and a circle so we can set up our ratios. Make sure that we're comparing the same thing in both ratios. So whatever we have our square in our first ratio should be the square in our second. So for proportions is a part to whole comparison. So every part number, that's going to be your square. Every whole number is your circle. And so when we're dealing with our percent, you know, is a part out of 100, the whole amount. That's where we always start. It's like an equation. Try to get equations for almost everything. So it's kind of just like plugging the numbers in the right place. Because I notice that the kids do a lot better when they have an equation and when they know where the numbers should go. And so that's what we see here. We have our equation, our proportions set up. We have our squares, everything's labeled. We have the part, the tax, that's what we're trying to find, the whole amount, the cost of the 2 items. And then our percent, the 8 and 2500ths over the 100, the whole amount. And then we did a great job showing how we cross multiply our 8 and 2500ths by 36 and then divide by our 100 to get the amount of tax for this particular items.
So you see, I think that this is not only great use of the skills you built in class, but it's also very streamlined in terms of where they started, what was their next step, and then how do they get to their final solution. So I definitely think that, you know, when we're looking for the great things, this is something that can be really great to show your class and saying, hey, you can put this up on the doc cam. Let's look at an exemplar of how we want our work to look and how you can tell exactly what the student is thinking by doing this. And any student who wants to continue to get better and better feedback, if they're putting their work in this type of manner, it's going to really help support them.
Absolutely.
Great job with that. I definitely love seeing kids. We saw it on so many of our tests,
yes,
which obviously, you know, pushed up our mastery at a large level. When I think about where we are, where we want to move forward, you know, finishing where we did in terms of about 73% mastery. We know that 27% of students that didn't master, a lot of them were some of our priority students. And thinking about what we want to do next, we definitely want to be able to prioritize some of those standards and questions that we know our students need more help in terms of getting them to the next level and preparing for the following IAs and obviously the STAR test. So I would love, if we are looking on one question that I think really can help us in terms of planning our reteach, is question 23, which was right where we scored our lowest amount of points. I would love for you to kind of talk me through as a start of like, what was that question looking for?
This question was a multi-step type of question, but still dealing with the same percent proportion. But it took it to the next level. Was given the example, there was a meal that they had to pay for, to leave an amount of tip, and then they're asking how much change that the person should receive. And that was the next step where most of the students missed out on that opportunity to get it correct. As far as reteaching that one goes, it's definitely emphasizing on the type of questions that ask for that next step. I know we saw a lot of practice on just being able to find that tax or tip amount and then seeing what would the total be. We didn't really see a whole lot of practice on, okay, we now have the total, so what if I go pay for this item? How am I gonna get my change back? And so that's definitely the next place where we can see to push the kids, so that when they see this type of questions again, they're like, oh, I have to pay for it, now I have to figure out how to get my money back.
Are there any keywords a student needs to be able to identify in the word problem before going to answer the question?
Biggest one is in the question itself is how much change we are going to receive. That should automatically include the kids in right there, because we talk about it a lot in 7th grade so far this year. When we see the word change, we are thinking about we're doing some type of subtraction somewhere in the problem. And that's just something that we definitely just need to be focusing on, and those keywords in the word problem to help that stand out for the kids.
Okay, now when you think of obviously trying to find an exemplar student steps to this problem, is there one of your test samples that has an exemplar response?
Let's take a look at this one. Yes, this one is better out of the 3.
Okay, so walk me through the process that you can tell from this student in answering this problem.
Okay, so once again, we had to figure out this 20% of the tip that we're going to leave behind. So once again, we need another ratio and proportion set up to find out that part of the whole entire cost of the meal. So this is what the student does. They have their shapes, the part in the whole for the squares and the circles, and put the numbers in the right place. They cross multiply and divide. They show the work right above it. And they show that the tip is going to be $7.73. And then we already talked about when we're adding a tip, when we're adding a tax, that's money being added to the original cost. So they go ahead and add the original cost of the meal and add in the tip to get the total cost of the meal, the $46.38. And then they took it to the final step, because they underlined right here in the problem how much change was $100, and they subtracted what there were $100 from the cost, and ended up with the correct amount of change.
It's a great step out in terms of step-by-step answer. In terms of your exemplar, would this have met all the expectations for what you were wanting, or is there something you would want it to add?
This is pretty good. Only thing that I would like to see, I know the space was really limited here, is just kind of have it in sequential order so you can quickly see where you're starting, where you go next, and then where you're going to finish. But I know the space was kind of limited, but I can easily find out where they're doing their first part, where they're going to be adding, and then where they're going to be subtracting.
Okay, so we see one student who's done a really good job in terms of setting this up for success. Let's try to compare this with another test where a student maybe did not show us exactly what we were looking for. You can look at a couple of tests and then I'll look at the same, and let's see if we notice that there's a trend specifically where students are making an error.
Yes. I have 2 right here. I have one student, we didn't start off with the process right, getting our squares and circles, our shapes for our proportions. So this led them down the path of not coming towards the correct answer. So off the break, this is one thing I just want to be able to focus on with the kids that didn't get these type of questions right.
What about this problem here? Do we see the same type of thing, not starting in the proper fashion?
Same exact thing. We're not starting where we should.
Okay, I see my student right here started in the right place. Where did we see their next step fall off?
Let's see, we start in the right place, we get our $7.73, and then they take they don't even add it, they stop, and for some other reason they just put the original cost back in for the answer. So they didn't go with the next step of adding the tip to the cost.
And these student here did the same thing the other 3 did, and they didn't set up their proportion correctly.
That is correct.
So if I'm looking at this, based on this information, what do you feel is the biggest thing we should prioritize in terms of how do we teach students to be set up for success with a problem where they're asking for proportion and then it has another step assigned to it?
The biggest thing that I'm definitely going to push for is whenever we see a percent, we have to automatically associate that with a proportion. And we're always going to start out with, hey, we need to make an equation. Equations tell us where to put the numbers every single time. So when we have a percent, this is the type of equations. We have our squares, we have our circles, we have the part, we have the whole. So just being able to emphasize on that going forward.
And I think the deeper conceptual piece is students have to understand that a percent is a part of something bigger.
Something else, right.
20% of the pizza is not the whole pizza,
Right.
It is a part of the pizza.
Absolutely.
And the more that they can understand that as they analyze a word problem, they're figuring out what do I need to really dig into in order to understand what am I taking away from, so I know what am I giving analysis to. Am I taking away from the change? Am I taking away from the product itself? Do I have 20% of the horse, or is it 20% of the pay for the horse? You know, I think that the more we can have them understand that piece, conceptually, the idea of proportion will make more sense, because they'll see that in, you know, converted fractions. All those kind of pieces that will come up potentially, and then as you get longer word problems, proportions can obviously be attached in a lot of different ways. And that'll obviously be something that's really big once they get to Algebra 1, and knowing that they have to understand how to set those proportions up when you've got multiple variables. Right. And it's like, this is x, and this is x over 1, and this is x squared. It's like, oh, you gotta put all these together and figure out where all these x's go, right? So I think that that's a really good take, exactly where we want to prioritize with this type of problem, and we see that it's a consistent trend with our kids. What would you think it would be the best process to reteach this if you were giving a 15-minute mini lesson in class, specifically going over this problem, like really focusing on how to get kids to set the proportion up exactly the right way?
Within 15 minutes, I would just emphasize and just give them a lot of at-bats as being able to set up the proportion correctly, because you need that part to even start. If we're not setting up the proportion correctly, there's no way that we can figure out A, how much tip, and then B, how much change we need to receive. So just really focusing on just setting up your squares and circles, and then really identifying, just like you said, what is the part, what is the whole amount. Being able to circle those, box those into word problems before we put them into the actual proportions themselves.
So I think one good thing to have every student do is have it be a common practice, is when they have a percent problem or any problem that they think is proportion, having that key of you need to square parts of it, and then the other part you need to circle, so they know exactly what that means. Part to whole, square to circle, make a little key, because then if you have that, then you know that they know it should be there, because we can't assume that this student knows it should be there because they didn't do it. So if you say every time you see a proportion problem, you need to put that there. If you don't put it there, then I can't assume you know it's a proportion problem. I think that that can definitely be something. Every time a kid is snagged on this type of problem, you can reinforce that, but then also can be a reinforcement you put on the board when you teach it. I think this is proportion. I'm going to put this right here so I can make sure we have it. As you think about trying to reteach this to students, do you feel like it is best for you to model this type of problem itself, or for you to give this problem to kids and have them kind of discuss it and kind of see where do they see the mistake if they're looking at a kid's answer potentially?
At this point in the year, definitely giving more ownership on the kids, because we've seen this before, we have a lot of practice on it, and then having them being able to analyze someone else's work and look, say, do we have this set up correctly? Where did we make the mistake? And just have them working in groups, working in pairs, to actually have that conversation with each other, so they can kind of bounce ideas off of each other. I think that'll probably be the best way to go about this.
Why do you think that that way specifically is going to close the gap?
That's one thing that I've been really focusing on. I know in my last conversation with Dr. Husko, that's one thing that we really talked about, is just giving the ownership to the kids and having them more opportunities to discuss things. And over the last several weeks in class, that's pretty much what it's been. Like, I'm up there teaching, I show you a couple of examples, now work and talk it out with each other, and hearing great conversations around the room, hearing the kids talk about what should be there. Oh no, I'm making a mistake. Oh, where did I make my mistake? So we're already practicing those skills, and just getting back second semester is just continue to develop those skills and get more practice at that.
One thing, especially for our priority students and our CSI kids, that can be really helpful is if a model like this is available, and you can actually say, you know, let's walk through this model. And then on the same type of problem, we did this last year a lot, where we changed the numbers and we say this goes from $100 to a $50 bill, this goes from $38.65 to $3.65, and this goes from a 20% tip to a 10% tip. And seeing with the same type of problem, knowing that they've got an exemplar that already worked through, can they set it up and get the answer? And then that's something where you can quick check where it's like, hey, your exemplar's up there. How does this step up there match what you just did? So that kids can have those conversations and they can see where gaps are, but they also have that reinforcement to help them out. I definitely think that that can be really, really helpful to make sure that we're getting kids exactly where they need to be. Now, in terms of prioritizing this, obviously with this being one of the lower question teaks that we had, I think we should really think through what the reteach might look like. When you look at the next step, what would the worksheet or kind of questions. Would you want to do the same type like this?